Epilog. A major revolution brews every 250 years. Governments need to cooperate with the invisible hand of free market capitalism, permitting the natural processes of progress and evolution to take their course. The miracle of democracy enables opposite principles to coexist in a dynamic interplay of growth and change, bringing the benefits to a broader base of people, not just the elite, who naturally innovate and create most of the wealth. It's a simple fact that if more people participate in economic growth and innovation, the whole system and the most people benefit. While I espouse free market capitalism as much as anyone, every game needs rules and simple regulations to ensure competition and balance, to ensure that the benefits of innovation and growth reach more of the people and are not confined to mafias, monopolies, and established special interests looking to guarantee their continued success, whether deserved or not. But regulations have to be as simple and minimal as possible and not strangle the creative system. That obviously does not describe our system today. Washington, D.C. and Wall Street represent the epitome of power and manipulation in America, and they are obviously in cahoots. Only a major financial crisis they can't control will end this imbalance. That's why I welcome an economic crisis and transition. It is the only way out of the mess that has built up for many decades, with its endless debt and the special interest complications now written into our tax and business systems, especially in healthcare and education. The progressive demographic cliff, with one country after the next falling off, will almost ensure such a crisis. Therefore, you should be prepared. My first rule for the crisis ahead would be no lobbyists and special interest groups ever again. There are countless examples, past and present, in which the powerful few take most of the gains, leaving the people poor. Think Iraq under Saddam Hussein and Kenya today. Most people were slaves, even back in the Roman Empire, and things weren't so fair and equal back in the enlightened 1700s in its agricultural economy. The mafia always operates on fear and coercion to its benefit, making most people subservient. It is no different when governments in developed countries control the economy and make it into a mechanical machine, which it is not, perverting and handicapping the very invisible hand of innovation and progress. I side clearly with the more conservative factions in politics when they argue against too much debt and too many regulations and fight against the degradation of the very free market principles that have created our success for centuries. That's why my favorite book of 2013 was Knowledge and Power by George Gilder. Gilder appropriately sees radical entrepreneurs, new technologies, and free market capitalism as the keys to the advancement of our standard of living. On the other hand, I don't agree with some among the supply side faction when they oppose every social and political innovation that ultimately fosters progress at all levels. How strong would our economy have been if we hadn't established the equality of African Americans and women and attracted immigrants and gave them a fair shot at the American dream? Conservatives, especially in the South, fought the emergence of the industrial economy, new technologies, and the abolition of slavery in the Civil War. They opposed the emancipation of women and their voting rights in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They fought the civil rights movement in the 1960s. They didn't see the inherent contradiction. The same people who espoused free markets and democracy turned around and opposed much new technology and social change that drove progress. There is similar resistance today among conservatives on fighting global warming, arguing it is a hoax when scientists are nearly unanimous in acknowledging the existence of climate change and its harsh consequences. They are in as much denial as the liberals are about mushrooming debt. Such opposition is akin to the Catholic Church fighting Galileo about whether the earth revolves around the sun. No, of course, we shouldn't kill the golden goose of innovation just because our economy is slowing, even if that hurts some banks, businesses, and households. But how can people who call themselves conservative be against the conservation of our natural resources? On the other hand, we must look to new technologies to solve some of these issues rather than as some factions of the liberal side wish, to regress back to a simpler lifestyle. That's just not going to happen. One key solution I see is simply to factor the cost of pollution into what we make and sell. We know carbon-based energies have costly consequences. We need to identify those costs, add them to the pricing calculation, then let the free market system find the best solutions, not the government. That is where government can make a contribution to the free market system. Help it account for costs that the free markets can't measure and control. You can't expect companies to make environmentally sound decisions if that causes their costs to be higher than their competitors and they lose market share. Put a tax on carbon and be done with it. Then it is a level playing ground for all companies to compete and innovate. In an article called Why Innovation is Still Capitalism's Star, published in the New York Times on August 18, 2013, Robert Shiller argued that bottom-up innovation from risk-taking entrepreneurs is still the secret to our growth and success. Thank God. He quoted a McKinsey study that said for every 10,000 real business ideas, 1,000 are founded as businesses, 100 get venture capital, 20 make it to an IPO or public offering, and 2 become market leaders. Radical innovation is a very hard and unpredictable process. I heard a venture capitalist a decade ago say that they make money on 1 out of 11 investments, and they simply don't know which one it will be. Governments should not determine which technologies are best. Only entrepreneurs can do that after much trial and error. George Gilder believes future energy solutions will not likely be solar panels or wind technologies because they're not digital, although sun and wind may well be invaluable sources in more rural areas that don't have access to high technology and infrastructure. These technologies have not seen the dramatic decline in cost that semiconductor and other high technologies have. On the other hand, if we went back to living in the woods and burning firewood, we would have much higher pollution than today. Those who argue that runaway debt is cheating the future for the benefit of today's prosperity must in the same way recognize that runaway pollution amounts to a parallel danger in the long term and likely a larger threat to the Earth's future. What will happen if most of our coastal cities are flooded with rising oceans late in this century? Even if global warming does not cause all of the dire consequences predicted, pollution, like debt, is never a good thing when it exceeds natural growth rates, when it's not recycled. It's like dumping your waste in your backyard. It's going to backfire, one way or the other. Waste is natural. But again, when it is not recycled properly, it becomes toxic and kills. Ask the people in China today. The democratic paradigm holds that cooperation for the whole is the better way. It was in evidence from the Protestant Reformation in the early 1500s forward and gained momentum in the American and French revolutions in the late 18th century. Human society evolved from small bands of hunters and gatherers to become communities of citizens in towns and growing cities. That has also meant, as different clans lived together in cities, we subverted our individualistic interest to some degree to benefit the greater whole. Otherwise, we would have nonstop violence and chaos. We need law and order, rules, and infrastructures that are commonly shared and initiated by government. And yes, that means we need more government and taxes to fund it in increasingly urbanized societies. George Gilder describes it as a more solid or orderly container from government that facilitates a dynamic private sector characterized by change and innovation. Capitalism cannot excel in a libertarian society or in chaos. And as I always stress, our economy is not like a machine. It is a dynamic system based on the interplay of opposites, in this case, democracy and government versus capitalism and innovation. The government brings stability, infrastructures, laws, and order. It should be as simple and predictable as possible, including our monetary system, which is crazy on steroids.